The Pacific Ocean was unnervingly calm that night, the kind of calm that felt staged, as if nature itself was holding its breath. The research vessel Aquila Deep drifting silently above one of the deepest, least explored trenches on Earth, its lights cutting thin white scars across the dark water, while inside, every monitor hummed with quiet tension. Because for the first time in recorded history, the ocean had done something it was never supposed to do. It had shown an image, not a reflection, not bioluminescence, but a structured, repeating visual pattern embedded inside the water itself, something Dr. Mara Elian had stared at for 3 sleepless nights straight, replaying the corrupted data again and again, hoping, praying it was a glitch, but it never changed. Never degraded, never behaved like noise, because glitches don't repeat perfectly, and memories do, which was why Mara now stood rigid in the control room as the deep-sea probe Nereus 9 began its descent, the metal pod sinking into the abyss like a coffin being lowered into a grave, its cameras streaming live footage as the depth counter climbed past 6,000 meters, past where pressure crushed submarines and sound itself behaved strangely, past where sunlight had never existed, the screens showing nothing but endless black until, without warning, the water around the probe began to shimmer, not glow, but shift, as if reality itself were bending, particles aligning into faint geometric flows that made the technicians fall silent, one of them whispering, "That's not current movement," right before the first hook hit, because suddenly the blackness unfolded into depth, perspective, structure, towering shapes forming where no structures should exist. The water becoming a lens instead of an obstacle, revealing the impossible, a city suspended inside the ocean, vast and alien, its spires stretching upward toward a sky that wasn't Earth's, stars arranged in patterns no human astronomer could recognize. And the room froze as Mara felt her chest tighten, realizing the terrifying truth before anyone else dared to say it out loud, that the probe wasn't seeing through the water, it was seeing inside it, like the ocean itself was projecting something it had been holding for a very long time. And when the figures appeared, tall, elongated silhouettes moving through the city with purpose, their bodies glowing faintly as if threaded with light, someone dropped a clipboard, another muttered a prayer, and the mission director asked, voice cracking, "Is this a simulation?" To which Mara answered softly, "No, it's a recording," just as the first twist struck, because the image didn't fade when the probe moved. It followed, locked to the water itself, reacting to the probe's presence, responding, as if aware it was being observed. The city dissolving suddenly into chaos as the sky darkened, massive, angular shapes tearing through the stars, descending with violent intent, weapons firing beams of energy that shattered towers and ripped glowing streets apart. The ocean around the probe vibrating violently as alarms screamed, and technicians shouting conflicting commands, while Mara stared in horror, recognizing this not as discovery, but as a final memory, the last moments of a civilization erased. Fire raining down, figures running, some looking up, not at the invaders, but straight toward the camera, straight through time, straight at us, as if they knew one day someone would be watching. And then came the second hook, because the probe's sensors detected something even more impossible: emotional imprint, fear, urgency encoded alongside the visual data, water molecules arranged not just to store images, but feelings, meaning the ocean wasn't just remembering what happened, it remembered how it felt to die. And just as the technicians began shouting about power instability, the entire image collapsed into darkness, the feeds stuttering before stabilizing again, revealing not a city this time, but a vast ocean, our ocean, seen from above, continents unfamiliar yet unmistakably Earth-like, and then a final message forming slowly within the water itself, symbols twisting into language only after the system struggled to translate it, the words appearing one by one on the screen like a verdict. We tried to remember. The ocean was all that remained. And the room fell into stunned silence, broken only by the hum of machinery, until someone whispered the question everyone was thinking: why Earth? And Mara felt a cold realization crawl up her spine, because before she could answer, the water around the probe changed again, not replaying the past, but reacting to the present. Sensors spiking worldwide as satellites suddenly detected identical molecular shifts across oceans thousands of miles apart, the Atlantic, the Indian, the Arctic, all responding at once, as if something ancient had just been tapped on the shoulder and awakened from a planetary sleep, which was when the third twist hit, because Nereus 9 transmitted one final packet of data before its systems overloaded. Not an image, not a message, but coordinates and a countdown. And when the feed abruptly went black, plunging the control room into stunned silence, alarms blaring across the ship, emergency lights flickering as the captain shouted that global communication channels were lighting up, governments demanding answers, militaries mobilizing, while outside, unseen beneath the waves, the ocean glowed faintly for the first time in human history, thin threads of light weaving through the depths like veins awakening under skin, and Mara, standing frozen before the darkened screen, understood the final hook that made her blood run cold. The ocean had not revealed itself by accident. It had waited, patiently, until humanity reached deep enough to touch it. And now that we had, it wasn't showing us what was, it was preparing to show us what was coming, because memories don't surface unless something triggers them, and somewhere out in the universe, the same thing that destroyed that ancient civilization was moving again, drawn not by signals from space, but by something far older and far quieter, the moment the ocean began to remember. The facility did not exist on any map, buried nearly 2 kilometers beneath the Pacific surface and anchored directly above the trench where Nereus 9 had gone silent, its existence known only to a handful of governments and scientists sworn into silence as the world above remained unaware that the ocean itself had begun to behave like a thinking entity. And Dr. Mara Elion felt the weight of that truth pressing on her chest as she stepped into the main observation chamber for the first time, a vast circular room surrounded by reinforced glass thick enough to withstand pressures that could flatten mountains, beyond which the ocean drifted in slow, hypnotic motion, darker and deeper than any sky, and yet subtly different now, alive in a way it hadn't been before. Threads of faint luminescence pulsing far below like distant lightning trapped beneath water, while behind her, teams of physicists, linguists, neurologists, and military observers studied data streaming across walls of holographic displays, all of it pointing toward a single terrifying conclusion: that Earth's oceans were not naturally occurring reservoirs of water, but an engineered medium, every molecule arranged with mathematical precision, capable of storing information far beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. And as days blurred into nights within the sealed facility, experiments confirmed what Part 1 had only hinted at. Water samples extracted from anomaly zones behaved like crystalline data lattices, rearranging themselves when exposed to specific frequencies, revealing fragments of alien star charts, genetic records of extinct species, entire histories compressed into fluid memory. And the deeper the team looked, the more undeniable it became that this planet had been chosen deliberately, seeded billions of years ago as a vault for knowledge that could not be allowed to vanish. But what unsettled Mara most was not the scale of the archive, it was its behavior, because the ocean no longer reacted passively to probes and sensors. It responded, shifting molecular structures when humans entered the water, adapting patterns when certain individuals were nearby. And the first sign that something had gone dangerously wrong came when a junior researcher collapsed during a routine dive simulation, clutching his head and screaming about burning skies and cities falling into water. Visions that medical scans later confirmed had not originated from trauma or hallucination, but from externally induced neural patterns matching the archived memory data, meaning the ocean was no longer content to be observed, it was transmitting directly into human minds. And as similar incidents multiplied, divers dreaming in alien languages, technicians waking with star maps etched into memory they had never studied, sailors reporting voices beneath the waves, Mara began to understand the second great twist. The archive was incomplete, fragmented by time, and it was attempting to repair itself using the only compatible processors available, human consciousness, which explained why she herself had begun experiencing flashes of memory during moments of proximity to the observation glass, images of vast halls beneath unfamiliar suns, of beings standing around a world-size ocean, encoding their final knowledge into water as fire fell from the sky. And when she shared these experiences with the team, the neurologists confirmed something that chilled the room to silence. Human brains, particularly those shaped by generations of oceanic exposure, showed an unprecedented capacity to interface with the archive, as if evolution itself had subtly aligned humanity to one day receive this inheritance. But the revelation did not come without cost, because as the ocean revealed deeper layers of stored knowledge, it also revealed the reason those layers had been sealed away, the reason the archive had remained dormant for eons. And it surfaced not as data, but as fear. A planetary reflex triggered the moment Earth's satellites began scanning deep space anomalies near the outer solar system, objects that did not emit heat, did not reflect light, and did not move like ships, but like predators waiting beyond a tree line. And the ocean reacted violently to their presence, generating pressure waves that rattled the facility's hull and caused containment systems to overload, as if it recognized something it had been hiding from for a very long time. And buried beneath layers of encoded memory, the team finally uncovered the truth about the civilization that built the archive. Not explorers, not conquerors, but survivors fleeing an extinction event that consumed not planets, but history. An enemy that erased civilizations so completely that even their memory could not survive unless hidden in a medium too fundamental to be destroyed. And the oceans of Earth had been selected because water existed everywhere, because destroying it would require destroying the planet itself, and because no intelligent species would ever suspect something so common could hold something so dangerous. And when this realization set in, arguments erupted within the facility, military commanders pushing to weaponize the archive's technology, politicians demanding shutdown protocols, scientists begging for time, while the ocean itself seemed to grow restless, increasing its direct transmissions, accelerating the integration process, choosing recipients without human consent. And when Mara finally confronted the core of the archive, an immense glowing structure of water suspended in controlled gravity at the center of the facility, she felt an overwhelming presence press against her mind, not hostile, but urgent. And in that moment, she understood the archive was not simply preserving the past, it was preparing for a future it feared was repeating, because the final message encoded in its deepest layer did not speak of survival alone, but of inheritance, of a time when the builders would be gone, and another species would stand where they once stood, forced to face the same devourer of memory that had ended them. And as alarms began to sound throughout the facility, external sensors detecting movement beyond the heliosphere, the unknown objects shifting course toward Earth, Mara realized with chilling clarity that humanity was no longer studying the archive, it was being activated, and the ocean, ancient and patient, had begun teaching its chosen students not how to remember the past, but how to fight what was coming. The first undeniable proof that humanity was no longer alone did not arrive as an invasion or a broadcast, but as an absence, a region of space beyond Neptune where background radiation simply stopped behaving like reality. Satellites returning data that looked less like interference and more like something missing. Entire bands of cosmic noise erased, as if the universe itself had been quietly edited. And inside the submerged Pacific facility, tension turned feral as external sensors confirmed the impossible. The objects detected weeks earlier were no longer stationary, no longer merely watching, but adjusting their positions in perfect silence, drifting closer with no propulsion signatures, no heat trails, no measurable energy output, moving not like machines, but like intentions. And the ocean felt it before any instrument could. Pressure waves rippling through deep trenches worldwide in synchronized pulses that knocked marine life unconscious and rattled the facility's hull like distant thunder, while Dr. Mara Elian stared at cascading data and realized the archive was no longer reacting defensively, it was panicking, accelerating transmissions into human minds at a rate neurologists warned could cause irreversible neural collapse. Yet the ocean did not slow, did not hesitate, because buried within its deepest layers was a memory far more terrible than extinction. The knowledge that once the devourers, as the ancient builders named them, noticed a civilization, that civilization was already dead, not because of superior weapons, but because the devourers did not conquer worlds, they erased meaning, targeting memory itself, collapsing civilizations by stripping them of continuity, identity, history, leaving species alive but hollow, unable to remember who they were or why they existed, drifting into self-annihilation long before the final physical erasure occurred. And as this truth surfaced, so did horrifying evidence that the process had already begun on Earth. Subtle at first, dismissed as coincidence, entire databases corrupted simultaneously across continents, archival footage degrading into static, ancient inscriptions losing coherence, languages experiencing unexplained semantic decay, words subtly shifting meaning in ways linguists could not explain until one moment shook the facility to its core when a historian embedded with the team suddenly stopped mid-sentence during a briefing and asked with genuine confusion, "What was the name of the city I was born in?" And when no one could answer, not because they forgot, but because the name no longer existed in any record anywhere on Earth, panic spread like wildfire, because this was not attack, this was consumption, the devourers sampling humanity the way predators test prey, and the ocean responded by unlocking what it had hidden even from the builders themselves. Defensive knowledge never meant to be used unless discovery was inevitable, revealing that the devourers could not be fought conventionally, could not be detected reliably, because they existed partially outside linear time, feeding on causality itself, erasing past and future simultaneously, which explained why their victims had never left ruins or warnings, and why the ocean archive was the only known thing they had ever failed to fully consume, hidden within water, because water, unlike information, is never static, constantly moving, constantly changing, making memory harder to isolate and destroy. And as this realization settled, global leadership fractured, emergency summits devolving into chaos as nations demanded access to the archive's knowledge, some pushing to use it as a weapon, others insisting on immediate global shutdown of all space observation and communication to avoid further detection, while cult-like movements erupted worldwide among those who had been exposed to the ocean's transmissions, people who believed the ocean was a god, a savior, or a harbinger of the end. And beneath it all, the devourers continued their silent approach, invisible but increasingly present, their influence bleeding into reality as satellites vanished without debris, deep space probes returned impossible data before going dark, and even the night sky began to feel subtly wrong, constellations shifting in ways astronomers could not reconcile with known physics. And inside the facility, Mara experienced the most devastating twist of all when the archive revealed the builders' final failure, that they too had believed they could pass their knowledge on in time, that preparing another species would be enough. But the devourers had anticipated this strategy, allowing archives to exist because archives attracted successors, and successors provided fresh memory to harvest, turning hope itself into bait. And when Mara realized this, her blood ran cold, because it meant Earth had not just been discovered, it had been lured, and the ocean, for all its ancient wisdom, was not a shield, but a beacon now fully awakened, broadcasting its activity across dimensions the devourers could sense. And as pressure waves intensified and global seismic anomalies spiked, the facility lost contact with Surface Command for several terrifying minutes, during which the ocean outside the glass did something no one had ever recorded before. It went still, completely still, every current halting as if time itself had paused, followed by a sudden surge of transmitted imagery so overwhelming that dozens of personnel collapsed unconscious, and those who remained standing saw what the ocean was showing, not as data, but as lived experience, a civilization's final stand, planets unraveling as memory collapsed, entire species forgetting language mid-sentence, forgetting gravity, forgetting existence. And then the image shifted to Earth, overlaid with projected futures branching like fractures, most ending in silence, and only a few showing resistance, not through weapons, but through transformation, through becoming something the devourers could not recognize as prey. And this was the moment the ocean made its most terrifying choice, initiating direct inheritance protocols that rewrote neural pathways in select humans, not asking permission, not slowing for ethics, because time had run out. And as Mara felt her perception expand painfully beyond linear thought, understanding concepts that had no words, she realized the final warning encoded within the archive was not meant for governments or militaries. It was meant for us, a species standing at the edge of its first true extinction-level contact. And when the facility's alarms finally fell silent and communication restored, the last confirmed sensor reading before blackout showed the devourer's presence no longer at the edge of the solar system, but already inside it, close enough that their influence could be felt in the water, in the sky, in the fragile continuity of human memory itself. And as pressure waves intensified and global seismic anomalies spiked, the facility lost contact with Surface Command for several terrifying minutes, during which the ocean outside the glass did something no one had ever recorded before. It went still, completely still, every current halting as if time itself had paused, followed by a sudden surge of transmitted imagery so overwhelming that dozens of personnel collapsed unconscious, and those who remained standing saw what the ocean was showing, not as data, but as lived experience, a civilization's final stand, planets unraveling as memory collapsed, entire species forgetting language mid-sentence, forgetting gravity, forgetting existence. And then the image shifted to Earth, overlaid with projected futures branching like fractures, most ending in silence, and only a few showing resistance, not through weapons, but through transformation, through becoming something the devourers could not recognize as prey. And this was the moment the ocean made its most terrifying choice, initiating direct inheritance protocols that rewrote neural pathways in select humans, not asking permission, not slowing for ethics, because time had run out. And as Mara felt her perception expand painfully beyond linear thought, understanding concepts that had no words, she realized the final warning encoded within the archive was not meant for governments or militaries. It was meant for us, a species standing at the edge of its first true extinction-level contact. And when the facility's alarms finally fell silent and communication restored, the last confirmed sensor reading before blackout showed the Devourer's presence no longer at the edge of the solar system, but already inside it, close enough that their influence could be felt in the water, in the sky, in the fragile continuity of human memory itself. And as pressure waves intensified and global seismic anomalies spiked, the facility lost contact with Surface Command for several terrifying minutes, during which the ocean outside the glass did something no one had ever recorded before. It went still. Completely still, every current halting as if time itself had paused, followed by a sudden surge of transmitted imagery so overwhelming that dozens of personnel collapsed unconscious, and those who remained standing saw what the ocean. The moment the ocean fell silent, humanity understood something far worse than invasion had begun, because silence, absolute and complete, replaced the constant motion that had defined Earth since its birth, currents halting mid-flow, waves freezing into unnatural stillness across every sea, satellite imagery showing a planet wrapped in glassy oceans that reflected the stars like mirrors rather than water. And inside the submerged Pacific facility, Dr. Mara Elian stood at the center of the archive chamber as gravity systems failed one by one, the vast suspended mass of water before her glowing not with light, but with meaning. Layers of encoded memory unfolding simultaneously, as if time itself had cracked open, flooding her mind with understanding too vast to process sequentially, revealing at last the full truth the builders had hidden even from themselves, that Earth was never meant to store the archive forever. It was meant to become it, a living continuation rather than a static vault, because static memory always dies, but memory that evolves can survive. And this was why humanity existed near oceans, why consciousness had developed the way it had, why imagination, abstraction, and storytelling had emerged as core traits, not accidents, but adaptations, evolutionary keys seeded subtly through oceanic influence over millions of years, preparing a species capable of carrying memory not as data, but as identity. And as Mara's perception expanded beyond fear into clarity, she saw the Devourers for what they truly were. Not gods, not machines, but inevitabilities born from the universe's hunger for equilibrium, forces that erased meaning to prevent civilizations from accumulating too much narrative mass. Because memory, when left unchecked, bent causality, and the Devourers were the universe's answer to that imbalance, pruning history the way entropy pruned energy. But what they could not process, what they could not consume, was distributed consciousness, memory that was not stored anywhere, not centralized, not recorded, but lived, shared, and constantly reshaped across billions of minds. And as this realization rippled through the chosen inheritors, scientists, artists, engineers, children, ordinary people scattered across continents, humanity crossed a threshold no technology could have achieved, neural pathways rewriting themselves under the ocean's guidance, allowing humans to perceive probability as texture, time as fluid, identity as collective rather than singular. And in doing so, they began slipping beneath the Devourer's perceptual horizon, becoming something the predators could sense only dimly, like shadows refusing to resolve into shape. While above Earth, alien probes finally revealed themselves, not descending in fleets or firing weapons, but hovering motionless in orbit as if confused, unable to lock onto targets that no longer existed as discrete entities. And this was when the final human conflict erupted, not against the Devourers, but among ourselves. Governments collapsing as traditional power structures failed overnight. Militaries discovering their command chains irrelevant when soldiers perceived orders before they were spoken. Religions fracturing as some declared the ocean a false god and others embraced it as a shared ancestor. And yet, beneath the chaos, something unprecedented emerged. A synchronization, not forced, not commanded, but instinctive. Humans across the globe sharing knowledge without language, coordinating actions without hierarchy. Cities evacuating before disaster struck because someone, somewhere, felt the danger ripple through the collective. And as the devourers pressed closer, reality itself destabilizing around their presence, erasing memories at the fringes of awareness, humanity responded not with resistance, but with refusal, refusing to be a single story, refusing to be legible, fracturing narrative into countless overlapping threads that the devourers could not isolate, could not harvest. And in the deepest trenches, the ocean performed its final act of defiance, releasing the last of the builder's memories, not as warnings, but as gratitude, scenes of alien worlds watching oceans like Earth's from afar, hoping, praying that one day someone would finish what they could not. And when the devourers finally attempted full consumption, targeting Earth's past, present, and future simultaneously, they encountered something unprecedented, a planet that remembered forward, projecting potential rather than preserving history, and the attack faltered, not defeated, but stalled. The devourers retreating into observation as the cost of erasing such a civilization became dangerously unpredictable. And in that fragile pause, humanity stood transformed, no longer a species defined by borders, archives, or monuments, but by shared experience, memory carried in living minds rather than stone or code. While the ocean, its purpose fulfilled, began slowly releasing its glow, currents restarting, waves remembering how to move, leaving behind not silence, but continuity. And in the final moments before global communication stabilized, Mara transmitted one last message to the world. Not an explanation, not a command, but a reminder encoded subtly through the ocean's resonance so it would be felt rather than heard. A message once written by another species and now rewritten by ours. Memory is not something you keep, it is something you become. And as Earth rotated beneath unfamiliar stars that suddenly felt less hostile, humanity took its first true step into the cosmic ecosystem, not as conquerors, not as prey, but custodians of meaning, knowing the devourers still existed, still watched, still waited, but also knowing that for the first time in the universe's long history, something they could not easily erase had learned to endure, not by hiding, not by fighting, but by evolving beyond the need to be remembered at all.